Hello and welcome. I'm Fanchon Stinger. We'd like to welcome all of you to this month's Farmington Hills Citizens Corps Council for Emergency Preparedness Cable Show. Our topic today, heat emergencies, and the extreme heat is right around the corner, finally. The mission of the Citizens Corps Council, of course, is to support and enhance the efforts of local public safety organizations in helping ensure that residents and business owners have the information, the education, and the skills necessary to protect yourselves, your families, your homes, and your businesses, of course, in the event of a local emergency. With me today, Rich Pullman. He is a warning coordination meteorologist from the National Weather Service. Welcome. Also, Sherry Garm. She's a member of the Citizen Corps Council and also a member of the Farmington Hills Planning Commission. Sherry, welcome to you as well. We appreciate both of you for being here. Rich, I want to start with you because we so often at home, when we're watching the news, we hear about the National Weather Service says this, or even on the radio, the National Weather Service says that. We don't often see you guys who work behind the scenes. So it's nice to put a face to the National Weather Service.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad to be here to talk a little bit about heat today.
What exactly, first of all, do you do?
Well, at the National Weather Service, we'll issue a 1 to 7 day forecast as the backbone of our operations. Okay. But the primary mission of the National Weather Service is to issue warnings, watches, advisories for the protection of life and property for the citizens of Southeast Michigan.
And so you do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week?
Yes, we're there every day, 24/7. We always have a staff capable of issuing those watches and warnings anytime. Of course, weather can happen anytime, yes. So we need to be prepared to issue those warnings, those life-saving warnings, anytime, even in the middle of the night, and so that we do have that 24/7 operation.
A lot of people always wonder when we see weather forecasts, how exactly you do that. Is it through computer technology?
And there's a lot of computer technology, but some of our technology goes back to the 1930s. Sending up a weather balloon and two times a day is sort of a 1930s type of technology that we still use, and it's the backbone of the computer models that we use.
Now explain to me the weather balloon and how that works.
Well, the weather balloon just goes up 2 times a day, gives us the information through the entire atmosphere up to 100,000 feet. Oh. So we need to know what's going on up at those jet stream level areas so that we can accurately forecast what weather's going to happen down here on the ground where we all are.
Okay, very interesting. We're learning something new, aren't we, Sherry?
Yes, we are. Yes.
What is the biggest challenge, would you say, of your job right now?
Oh, the biggest challenge is probably getting those life-threatening warnings out there in an appropriate time so people can take action. That's one of the goals that we have, is to make sure we have 20 minutes of lead time on certain warnings. Since we're talking about heat, we'd like to have a day's notice for the excessive heat so people have time to prepare.
Now, speaking of heat, we're coming off of winter, so we're all ready for the warm summer months. We don't have to worry about storms or winter storms, so to speak, or frostbite or anything like that. We can enjoy our nice, light summer clothing. But it's also easy to forget when we get so excited about heat in the warmer weather that heat can be very dangerous and in some cases deadly. When we're talking about extra hot summer days, what does that term extra hot really mean?
Well, extra hot is when it goes very high and your humidity may be even high. Okay. But if you're doing certain things that may pose problems as far as heat in your body, absorbing it or releasing it as far as sweat, that's exactly what hot is.
Now, from a meteorological standpoint, in terms of extra hot, what number would you equate with that?
Well, we actually call it kind of excessive heat, and we combine the heat, the temperature, and the humidity. Okay. And we look at levels of 100 degrees for a heat index as an advisory type of condition, and a warning type of condition up at 110 degrees.
Really? Okay. Now, how often do we get that type of weather here in Michigan, and can we probably expect some of that this summer?
Well, the heat and humidity combination together, we will see 3 or 4 times in an average year. Here in Detroit, we'll see about 13 90-degree days, and then if we have enough humidity, that'll get up the heat index up into that 100 to 110 degree range. Now nationally, heat affects really every part of the country from coast to coast, and it's those areas east of the Rocky Mountains that really deal with the humidity, and that combination of the heat and humidity is what is dangerous.
Okay.
Now across the United States, there's on average about 237 deaths per year due to the heat. It's kind of known as the silent killer,
Exactly.
just because you just don't hear about it. You hear about the tornadoes, you hear about the storms. You don't hear about the excessive heat and what it can do. And heat waves, when they hit areas of the country, the 1980 heat wave, even though it was pretty dry, enough humidity, enough heat that unfortunately over 1,000 people died in that heat wave.
Just to back up what you said, every day on Fox 2 News when we're reporting during the summer months, we often have stories where people are collapsing because of heat exhaustion, they're not hydrating, and really heat problems can affect any age, any gender, just across the board.
Right. Well, actually, the most vulnerable are your children and elderly and injured, but then you have to take it into consideration that perhaps an athlete is out there on a very hot day and they're doing something that is exerting their muscles and what have you, and they're sweating and they get worked up, and that can be fatal if they're not watching the warnings.
Exactly. And a lot of kids are going to be going to camp this summer.
Yes.
Parents are signing up for camps right now. Let's talk about some of the warning signs that parents and the kids need to also be aware of.
Okay, well, I guess the first one that you think about is sunburn. And for the most part, every parent is going to put on ointments, and for ourselves too, you put on that sort of things in any dry material like a gauze or something like that. But if it gets any worse than that, you want to definitely call 911, not 911 necessarily, but your doctor.
Oh, your doctor,
and,
okay.
and get in for that.
And since we're talking about sunburn, and you think of sunburn being out in the sun too long, it's important to take those protective measures, and especially for the children. Here's a little known fact that, everybody will experience 95% of the ultraviolet rays affecting their body by the time they're 18 years old, because younger skin is more susceptible to the ultraviolet radiation, and you're more likely to be outside when you're young as well. So you will receive 95% of those harmful ultraviolet rays before you're 18. So that's a good idea to protect your kids with the sunscreen. Wear hats as necessary. And for the kids that might be out there, listen to your parents and to your teachers so that you cover yourself up.
How do you know when a sunburn has reached that critical point? Because I know I've had instances where I've felt tenderness, but of course there's a point where it needs medical attention. How do you know when that is?
Well, there's also certain times of the day that you should be extremely careful, like from 11 to 1 or 2. But I think you can feel a prickling, because what's happening is your blood vessels are coming to the surface and trying to respond to your particular what you're doing to it.
Okay.
And I think, as you were saying, Rich, when I was younger, they didn't pay attention to that much, and we didn't wear hats, and we just went out without. In fact, we used to put on things like copper tone to make sure we'd get deeper tans.
Oh my goodness.
Well, you wouldn't do that today, and I think it might. Perhaps you could help me with that. Is that the atmosphere has changed, that we're getting more rays?
Well, there is a little thinning of the ozone layer, and the ozone layer is what protects us from that ultraviolet radiation. I'm no means an expert in climate change and that sort of area of meteorology, but
I have to imagine it plays some role.
Oh, it certainly does. I mean, there is scientific proof that the ozone layer has thinned. We have the holes over each pole each winter season over those poles, and so there is a thinning of the ozone layer, and the ozone layer up in the stratosphere, up at 50 to 100,000 feet, that ozone layer is what protects us from the ultraviolet rays, and so we do have more of those rays coming into us.
Let's talk a little bit about heat exhaustion. We hear this term thrown around a lot during the summer months, but what exactly does that mean?
Well, I mean, that's the very end of it. You could get some warnings a little bit ahead of time with your heat cramps.
Okay.
And you'd be feeling even a little nauseous and so forth, and you should think about that. And I think that athletes especially tend to ignore it. Or I can say this in my own case, going out in the garden and just staying and not paying attention. Exactly. And suddenly your heat exhaustion, what happens is the blood is responding to that and coming to the surface of your skin, and thereby denying your vital organs that blood. So you're going to get weakness and other things, cramps.
Those are some important things to look out for. The most severe, of course, is heat stroke.
Yeah, that's correct. And heat stroke's a life-threatening situation where you need medical attention right away. Your body temperature increases up to 106 degrees. Your pulse rapidly increases and is a pretty strong pulse when you feel that. And then medical attention is needed right away. As with any of these heat-related illnesses that come along, important thing is to get out of the sun and get into a shaded area. And then as it progresses to that heat stroke, again, medical attention is necessary right away.
911. You know, of course, every year we put these warnings out. I know we do, in terms of children and pets, especially when it comes to cars. You want to reiterate that? Because that, I mean, we see that so often. People think, okay, I'm just going to leave them in the car for a few moments. You can't do it.
Don't do it, because anytime that you ever stay in your own car, perhaps to leave the window shut and look at your shopping list and so forth, you realize how fast that heat builds up. And never leave children, you know, or older people. Say you're leaving your mother in the car and you just want to keep her safe, and so you'd leave the car locked, and that's dangerous.
Right.
And so we should be aware of that.
And it doesn't have to be a day where we have a heat advisory out there. You want to pay attention to that. Even a sunny 80-degree day, which, you know, in the middle of summertime feels maybe even a little cool, depending on the summer conditions. Even a sunny day at 80 degrees could be potentially dangerous. And so anytime in the summertime, that's a good idea not to keep the kids and the pets in the car.
So a good rule of thumb is always do everything with caution and in moderation. Speaking of heat and heat index and that, what would you consider, or how do you define a heat wave?
A heat wave is technically defined as a 3-day period where your high temperature is 90 degrees or higher.
Okay.
And so here in the Metro Detroit area, we're going to have 1 or 2 of those each summer. And again, we'll have 13 90-degree days throughout the summer. It's really when that humidity starts to increase that we'll start to see the serious effects of heat-related injuries and illnesses that come along with that.
So as the temperature begins to rise, what can we do to protect ourselves, our bodies, from the heat?
Some simple things: drink plenty of water and non-alcoholic type of beverages.
A lot of people hear, I want to have a cold beer. You know, but that, I guess, would defeat the purpose.
Anything with alcohol does defeat the purpose. Water, you don't want to drink things with caffeine either. You know, water is going to be your best source of hydration. Keep yourself hydrated. Wear light, loose-fitting clothing, a lot of whites and light colors, things that are loose on your body to make sure that you can get the necessary circulation to keep your body cool. And limit your activities to the morning and to the evening hours. During the peak heating of the day, go someplace with air conditioning. Good idea.
Now, Sherry, you mentioned spending a lot of time in the garden. Do you have anything to add in terms of protecting ourselves when we are outside for a number of hours?
Well, I do try to keep a hat on, there's no question, because the sun is, you absorb, same as in the winter, 20% of your heat escapes through your head, and people should wear hats when it's cold. So, and it's hard to wear a hat in the summer when that sun is beating down. But it's important to just keep that cool and those rays off of the top of your head. But I think loose clothing, like he mentioned, is very important.
You talked about the elderly being particularly at risk a little bit earlier. What about people who, let's say, or even children with epilepsy, heart conditions, kidney conditions, or liver disease? I'm assuming there are some special precautions those people need to be thinking about.
Well, I would suspect, I think their doctor would probably warn them, and to be honest with you, I don't know what they would tell them to do.
Okay. I know we had some information in terms of salt tablets.
Yeah, and again, that's following your doctor's orders is going to be the best idea there. Salt naturally dehydrates you, and so again, with heat, we're looking for hydration, looking for ways to keep the body fluids available, and so again, pay attention to what your doctor says. Consult your doctor if you're taking salt tablets during the times of extreme heat, because again, salt is an agent that can dehydrate the body, and the key is to keep yourself hydrated and cool.
When we're talking about sunburn, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke, of course, those are graduating levels of severity. It could end up in a situation where someone needs to administer first aid. So I would imagine being up and being knowledgeable in terms of first aid can help in any of those instances.
That's right, and especially that's why it's so important. Our Farmington Citizens Corps Council, we put on first aid events approximately 3 to 4 times a year, and we'll leave a date at the end of this broadcast to tell you when. But they're very informative. In fact, I went through one recently, and I want to go through it again just to reinforce what I've learned. Right. But I think as far as sun, you want to make sure there are ointments that are SPF, factors that will tell you what is good. And children, their skin is so delicate, you have to be careful, and I think the elderly too.
Are there some things that you may know of off the top of your head in terms of dealing with the heat disorder symptoms in terms of a sunburn? Or I know a lot of times they say give water right away, things like that.
Well, I think you have to be careful with the water. If you see somebody with heat exhaustion, you tend to make sure they're comfortable. If possible, lay them down and even elevate the feet.
Okay.
And cool cloths can be applied. And I think a lot of people want to do ice, and ice is not the way to go. It's better to do cool cloths. And if you see someone with heat cramps, you can massage those very gently to ease that person.
Oh, see, now that's something I hadn't thought of.
Right.
But that makes sense.
Yes, it does. It's really, like I said, it's mostly comfort factor. And it also, you know, there's an alarm level when you know that you're fainting or something. So if someone can make you feel better and say calm down and slow down. I think we all should slow down a little bit in the summer, and that's often hard, especially for mothers that are chasing children
Exactly.
and things like that. But you can do that and loosen the clothing.
Well, all of this talk about heat and sun and sunburn, I know a lot of you out there probably are wondering, what is our summer going to be like? Now, since we have the National Weather Service right here with us in the studio, we're going to ask him that question. Can we expect, and I know you can't say for sure, obviously you're predicting, but can we expect a warmer summer this summer, or how do things look right now?
Well, things right now, it's good to be talking about heat because the last 2 summers have been extremely cool for here in Michigan. We have to go all the way back to 2002 to get to a warm summer, and that was actually a very warm summer, one of our warmest on records. But looking ahead to this year, right now it looks like average is about the best bet right now to go with that average of 13 90-degree days and see our temperatures typically in the 80s. We can't really get much cooler than we were last summer, and so hopefully that means better summer weather to do those outdoor activities. But it's also a good time. When we're talking about heat, it's a good time to reinforce the safety tips here with heat awareness. More than ever, we probably need to be prepared for heat because it's been 2 full years since we've seen that summer heat.
So hopefully we'll have heat and not a lot of rain on the weekends.
That's right.
It seems like in Michigan, every time we get to the weekend, some summers, it just rains. And I remember one summer where it rained almost every weekend. So,
Not fair.
no.
We'll try our best.
Okay.
We'll do our best to make sure that it rains only at night during the weekday.
We know you can't control that, but it's always fun to joke about it. Is there anything else you'd like to add in terms of gentle reminders that we need to just be thinking about?
Yeah, I think that especially people that don't always have air conditioning and so forth,
That's
they might
true.
have fans and what have you. You should try to do all your very active things whenever possible early in the day. And if it's an extremely hot day and you know it's coming and they're saying it's 90 to 100, and it certainly happens, do your activities in the morning, and then perhaps if you can, especially if you don't have air conditioning, go to cool places. The malls are very, very generous in opening their malls at 8:30 in the morning before their stores open, and you can walk around there, and that's comfortable. And of course, you can go during the day, and this is an opportunity to see museums, go to the show.
Exactly. You're right.
Libraries are wonderful places because you can go in and you can read the paper and magazines, and so often they have programs that we don't know about, and when you research it, they're wonderful.
Exactly. Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I'd like to just again stress the difference between the temperature and the heat index and how much the humidity does matter. And oftentimes it can be confusing. You hear numbers like the temperature is 90, but the heat index is maybe 98. And so we're given 2 different numbers, both talking about degrees of temperature. And just again, the temperature is the straight temperature, whereas the heat index does combine the effects of that humidity. We always hear that saying that it's not the heat, that is the humidity. And there is quite a bit of truth to that.
So, Rich, should we pay attention more to the heat index then? Or thinking about safety?
When we're thinking about heat safety and the precautions, definitely think about the heat index as opposed to the overall temperature. Just like in the wintertime when we have the wind chill temperature, in the summertime we have the heat index, the combination of 2 things. And then pay attention to the Weather Service's watches, warnings, and advisories. We will issue heat warnings, heat watches, and heat advisories. And again, the thresholds there may be a little hard to remember. It's a 100-degree heat index for a heat advisory, and that's the time you really need to think about the precautions. And then if we ever get into excessive heat warning of a heat index of 110 degrees, everybody out there really needs to pay attention to the heat and take those safety warnings. But you don't need an advisory or a warning to have a life-threatening situation. We talked about the kids and cars, pets in cars. And even for the young and the elderly, heat indexes solidly in the 90s are going to cause issues, and we may not have an advisory out. So you do have to pay attention to all these little weather details and be prepared for the heat this summer.
All right, well, this has been some very valuable information. Thank you both for your time today. And of course, we know summer is right around the corner. We want to make sure that everyone has a good time. The kids are going to be out of school. They're going to be in camp. We're going to be able to get out as families and enjoy the heat. So we wanted to say, of course, have fun, but know when enough is enough. Know when to come inside, take a break, know when to bring the children inside, know when to hydrate. And of course, like Rich said, water is the best tool for hydration. So again, thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Richard, for your insight today, and we want to make sure that everyone has a safe and happy summer. Until next time, I am Fanchon Stinger, urging you on behalf of the Farmington Hills Citizens Corps Council for Emergency Preparedness to make preparedness a part of your day each and every day. Thank you so much for watching.